right. Hello to those just joining in right out the gate here. Welcome to tonight's JUMPinar. Just give us a few minutes to let others hop on the call and we'll get started very shortly. Okay, so we have about 20 plus people on the call, so I think that's a good place to get started. And I'm sure more will join in as we get started here. But I'll start by welcoming everybody to tonight's Jumpstart Germantown JUMPinar. And if this is your first time joining us, this is our every couple weekly webinar series where we cover various topics in real estate that we don't have time for in our official training program that we'd like to kind of do a deeper dive on and make sure that we can get people the information that they need from experts in the field. And we have, like I said, a variety of topics, but tonight we're focusing on the title insurance process and specifically a certain type of title, which is a tangled title. And it's a situation that a property can be in, and we'll learn more about it as we get going with the interview tonight. But before we get to that, I just want to quickly give a couple updates about Jumpstart. Obviously, as always, we are open to accepting loan applications. So you can go to our website, either jumpstartgermantown.com and click on the loans tab, or just go straight to jumpstartphilly.com and find out all the information about our loan programs, how to apply, all the terms and eligibility requirements and such. We're happy to have first-time loan requests and help people with their first project and getting them involved in the game. So be sure to check out our websites. If Scotty could type those in the chat, that would be great, just so everybody has them. And also, in addition to our loaning program, we also have a training program, which happens 2 or 3 times a year. And our next upcoming program is scheduled for the fall of 2022. So it's going to be taking place from, I think, the first or second week of October into the first week of November. And you can go ahead and register and apply for that now. And we're starting enrollment. And once you apply and get the confirmation, you can see the dates and make sure it works with your schedule. And we would be excited to have you join us come fall. And it is a virtual program. And the last thing I'll say about it is probably going to be our last virtual program, and we're going to switch to an in-person format moving forward after that, and be restricting attendance to just Germantown residents and local residents, rather than accepting anybody like we are now. So if you're interested in taking the program and want to do it but don't live in Germantown, this would be your last chance. So be sure to go to our website and apply. The last thing, just as quick housekeeping, we are going to have a Q&A little session at the end of today's discussion. So if you stick around until the end, probably at around 7:45 or so, we're going to switch to questions from you guys. So you can go ahead and type those into the Q&A box on your Zoom toolbar there as we discuss tonight, and hopefully Joseph can chime in and get you some answers when we get to them. But yeah, that's all the introduction I have, and I'll read a brief bio for Joseph here, and then we'll get started with the conversation. So Joseph Consul is a Pennsylvania and New Jersey attorney, and he practices in Philadelphia, focused on commercial and residential real estate, specializing in zoning and land use, as well as tangled title matters. So the topic for tonight is tangled titles, and we'll talk about exactly what that means in a minute. But first, I'll let our guest Joseph introduce himself. How's it going, Joseph?
It's going good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you taking time out on a Wednesday evening.
Yeah. Oh, I'm here. Happy to be here and talking to whoever's on the call.
Great. Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and jump right into it. And I kind of just want to ask you a little bit more about yourself.
Sure.
I mentioned that you're an attorney and you specialize in real estate and zoning laws, but why don't you tell me a little bit more in detail what you do and what's your specialty as an attorney?
Yeah, sure. Joseph Consul, my firm's Consul Madison. We are primarily based in Philly, but we have an office in Media, Delaware County, and an office in Haddonfield, New Jersey. My partner and I practice on both sides of the river. I have been doing real estate law for 15 years since I graduated. I got my start doing land use and probate work in New Jersey, and then I brought that over to Philly when I opened my own practice about 10 years ago. So.
Okay, cool. Have you done any development yourself or completed any projects, or are you just on the attorney side of things?
I'm just on the attorney side of things for now.
Cool.
That may change in the future, though. It's the kind of thing where the more you know, the less you might want to actually be involved on.
Sure, yeah, I'm sure you better than anybody probably know what sticky situations developers get them into, right?
Yeah. And then it's just a matter of I've been building my business for so many years, and it's hard to say oh, when should I jump in myself? But I'm sure I'll get there.
Cool.
But that's where I'm at for now.
Cool. Well, why don't you also tell me a little bit about who your clients are? Like, what scale of development are you usually working with? Is it large commercial developments or single-family homes that you're working with? Where's the scope of things here?
Yeah, sure. So I basically got started when I opened my firm. Like I said, approximately 10 years ago, a little bit more than that, early 2012. I didn't have any contacts in the city or anything like that. So I started just telling people I was a real estate lawyer, and I started getting involved with what I would call smaller clients, single family home purchases, flips. I got involved with a lot of wholesalers, and that soon grew. And now I do transactional work on a larger scale, but also I don't turn away from smaller scale work. We do, I was in the zoning board all day today, doing a couple large projects, and I have some clients that purchase properties that are $15 million, but I'm also not going to ignore a call from someone who wants me to just review an agreement of sale for a triplex. That I want to be a direct to consumer attorney. I like dealing with people. Obviously there's some benefit to dealing with larger clients, but at the moment, I'm happy to talk to everyone. Developers, wholesalers, investors is my typical wheelhouse.
Gotcha. Yeah, and you started giving some examples there of types of cases you work with. Is it usually zoning issues or is there a difference? I guess, is there a clear difference to you between a tangled title and a zoning case or anything, or do you categorize them like that, or?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, zoning work is. I'm sure you guys have had experts on zoning before speak, but zoning is trying to get the properties into a position where you can develop them as you see fit, whether that's using them differently than they're supposed to be used, or or the dimensions of the property require that we ask for relief so we can build closer to the street, a smaller backyard, higher than we want it to be, that sort of thing. And that's separate apart from what we'll talk about today, which is tangled title work. And of course, I do a lot of transactional work too. I have folks that just give me a contract and say, hey, can you get me the edits in 2 days, and that sort of thing. So that's those are I would say the three like buckets that are the areas that I'm most passionate about as an
Okay,
attorney.
cool. Yeah, it
I'm
sounds like
not
you're.
an eviction attorney.
What's that?
I said I'm not an eviction attorney.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'm sure that's a whole other conversation we could have another 40-minute one on.
Yep.
But yeah, so I kind of want to jump into the definition of what our topic is tonight, and that's tangled title. So why don't you tell me where that term comes from? When I interview or when we had our prep discussion, I was like, that's a great word, tangled title. And you were like, I come up with that. So why don't you tell us where it originated and what it means?
So I participate in pro bono work with the Philadelphia VIP, which is volunteer attorney program. Yeah, I always try to keep a case going. And I started, I guess it was 2014 or 2015, I got asked to handle what they called a tangled title case. And there's no, I would say, direct definition for it. I'm gonna tell you what their kind of top-down definition is as I understand it, and then I'll tell you what it means to me. So I found an old email where I was like, hey, what's a tangled title? When I got the referral for the pro bono client, and what they said was it's when there's a property title that does not accurately reflect the present homeowner's claim to the home.
Gotcha.
For instance, children or grandchildren or aunts and uncles may live in homes that are in the name of a deceased relative. So sometimes people pass away and people continue to live in the property. On the day-to-day, it doesn't affect them. They can still pay the bills. They can do everything they want. But if they ever want to take a loan out, if they ever want to sell the property, suddenly they run into this issue where they, for all intents and purposes, they're the owner, even though they're technically not. And then I can step in and assist with that. Now, as I broaden that definition to describe work that I do, I've also used it to describe other situations that typically require filing something like a quiet title application, which is like where you're actually filing something in the court of common pleas in Philadelphia or the counties or Jersey, where maybe there's an outdated mortgage on the property, or other random situations where there's like a old agreements of sale, because there was a time when the register, the deeds office would let you record an agreement of sale on the property as a way to block, to sort of cloud the title. And sometimes those would get filed and they would never be pursued. And 5 years would go by, and then that person would go to try to sell it, and they say, "Oh yeah, I was under agreement 5 years ago with somebody, but it never came to anything. But they recorded the agreement of sale." Then you can't find the person to get it removed, and so I consider that to be a tangled title. Again, it's not real. It's just a bucket in my head of the kind of work that I do. And the goal is, of course, to clear the title such that the property can get sold. Or refinanced.
Right. And I like the way you described it at the beginning, as it's when on paper it says something that's not actually the reality of the situation. And I think that's like an easy way for people to kind of generalize that in their head, and they think, okay, when the title insurance agent says, here's this problem and this, red circle on the piece of paper, that's when it becomes a tangled title. So what I want to talk about, and you briefly mentioned a couple scenarios, like how do properties become tangled? It sounds like it's just somebody forgets to, transfer the title, or when someone deceases, or, I'm sure there could be limitless possibilities, but is it mainly just people kind of not, like slacking on the maintenance of the title, or could it actually, or could there be like other nefarious reasons at play? You know what I mean?
Oh, sure. So like from the like innocent sufferer standpoint, you could see a situation where there's a deed fraud. I mean, and to me, like I'm dealing with a situation now where someone just straight up forged the deed. And that person was immediately caught by the owner of the property, and then the nefarious actor just disappeared. And so they are not fighting the case. They're not doing anything, but because of the way it works, you have to actually put on a case that could take up to 18 months in Philadelphia to prove that that's an incorrect filing against the property. And then it moves along the continuum to an old mortgage. Again, it could be that you paid this mortgage off in the 70s. Your grandmother paid it off. but the mortgage company never filed a satisfaction. She didn't know enough to know that there had to be a satisfaction filed, and then you're trying to sell it, and this comes up. Oh, it's a $30,000 mortgage. Well, if we do the interest, if you can't prove you pay it, there could be interest from 1972.
Yeah.
And then even farther along the spectrum is just folks who have lived in a property their entire life. They can be 70 years old, 80 years old now, and they were just never educated in how property works. So their grandmother owned it, their parents owned it, even though they never actually took title, and they own it even though they never actually took title. So then part of it becomes like, typically an investor comes to me and says, hey, I have someone who's trying to sell me a property, but the title's messed up. What can you do? So then it's always like, and again, I don't want to get ahead of myself with any questions, but it's always like me having to spend some time educating people about their expectations, which is a lot of what I do as a lawyer, and just say, hey, this could be an 18-month fix, unfortunately.
Right. So it sounds, what I'm hearing is, whether there's ill intent or not, a little mistake can cause a lot of headaches, right? It can cause big issues and delays, right? And possibly miscalculations of how much money you should be getting, right? And that sort of thing. So
yeah, definitely. And what I think is important to mention there is, like, if you're trying to purchase a property and you just sort of ignore paying attention to the title report that you get, and you fail to do things like get your extensions, you might lose the ability to buy that property. It might be that you let that slip through your cracks. I've explained to everyone that it's going to be 18 months, and you didn't do what you had to do to stay on top of it and say, hey, if I'm going to ride this out with you as the buyer, but they, at that point they may realize that they have something that they can untangle themselves or hire me. You know what I mean? So it's good to be savvy on the end of being the buyer or the wholesaler in these situations, for sure.
Yeah. So speaking of, like, on the buyer side of this, most jump starters are going to find themselves in a situation when they're trying to source properties, and like you said, the seller says or when they start to run the title search, right? The tracks stop and all progress halts, and they can't move forward. Who would you say is best equipped to acquire these properties? I mean, who can, like, move in there and get it done real quick? Is that like something that large developers have an advantage with, or it's, you see what my question is sort of like, who's not worrying about Tangled titles, I guess.
Well, I guess it's a matter of, like, what I have happen a lot is a buyer will find a seller, and it's, where you see this the most is, just single family lots that have been, it could be a lot that's just been in a family forever. It could be the family didn't even know that they were entitled to this lot, and through whatever sourcing you're doing as the potential buyer, you find someone, you bring them to me, and you say, hey, there's some, we believe this person's entitled to sell me this property. What can you do? I explain everything to everyone, and then you say to the buyer, hey, I'm happy to come out of pocket for this work, but we need to get under contract such that once we untangle this, you're going to sell the property to me. And then again, I can help walk folks through how to properly paper that. But the takeaway is, you don't really have to be someone with super deep pockets to keep a couple of these balls in the air, because you're coming out of pocket what is really, a few $1,000s is nothing to sneeze at, but you're not coming out $20,000-$30,000. You're coming out for a lawyer's fee to see a relatively small case through to the end. And then when we get there, meanwhile, you've been getting everything else ready to buy the property. And then when we get that deed, that decree that we need from the court, that order that we need from the court, suddenly, you're able to take possession, and it was all worth it. Yeah.
Gotcha. So now that's, it sounds like that scenario you just described is kind of just like, you got to have the capital to make that offer and say, hey, I'm going to pay for these court fees. I'm going to take this risk up front, or we'll put down this money up front to move forward. What about for people who don't have, that capital or the capacity to do that? what barriers do these Tangled titles create for new developers? Like obviously that from the perspective of a lender, we see a lot of jumpstart loan applications. They just stop right at the point where there's title issues, or that's where the biggest holdup is, and it takes forever to close. Like what other than timing, I guess really, what are these barriers that new developers are seeing with Tangled titles?
I mean, it sounds like timing and money are the two issues, and also a lack of creativity, I would
Yeah.
say too,
Okay.
especially. And I don't mean to rag on real estate agents, but oftentimes when there's real estate agents involved, there's a little bit less willingness to be creative with how this stuff is done. So it could be, you're coming in and there's a real estate agent on the seller side. There's something tangled there, and the agent has never dealt with a creative situation before, so everything seems a little skeptical to them, where they feel like they're going to get cut out. Um,
So
but
it sounds like somebody just chickens out eventually, right? Whether it be the developer who's making the offer, or the lender, or the real estate agent, right? It sounds like there's just a breaking point where people are like, we don't want to move forward with this, right?
oh yeah, definitely. That's almost that happens a lot, and there's lots of situations where the ball was dropped by someone completely different than who comes to me,
Right.
and he brings to me all the paperwork, the old title report, so I can see exactly what was wrong. And it's like we're already ahead of the game at that point, because you or whoever else did the legwork, got 30% of the way there, and then bailed. And so we're starting at 30% ahead of the game, and we still got to do what we have to do. But it's just a willingness to be creative and to think long term in what you're doing, that I think is what I see, especially in a market like today, where there's the idea of sourcing properties is systematized, and it's so hard to find deals. Everyone knows that, and so when you find ones that we can make work, it's good.
Yeah. So
It's
that's a perfect segue to the next question, which is sort of like, why do this, right? Why go after a Tangle title? Why pursue ownership of something like this? And I mean, my guess would be that it comes down to because properties are really hard to come by, right? And we need to get creative of how we're going to acquire them. So, what do you see as the benefit for new developers to go after these sorts of properties? Why go through the extra hurdle of clearing up the title?
because I think if you're in it for what you consider to be the long haul or a long haul, if
Mhm.
you think 5 years ahead of where you want to be, there's a lot of situations where this is a half. We could get this done 6 months, 9 months, but the timeline horizon, if you're looking at your career in this industry into the future, it's not that far ahead. And so if I have clients who have got two or three quiet title, two or three probate issues that I'm untangling for them, at present. And it's the kind of thing where I even defer my fees sometimes until the property actually gets sold. And
Mhm.
so and those are things that are always available to discuss with me. But 2 years from now, these guys, I know that these deals will be untangled, and they're going to flip them, or they're going to take possession and rehab them, and they're going to be in a place where they want to be. And I will have been a very helpful cog in that process. And a lot of my larger developers, the guys that are doing $10 million+ deals, are guys that we met 10 years ago when neither one of us had a pot to pee in, or whatever the term is. And
Yeah.
I've grown with them and seen them, helped see them through a lot of these more smaller deals, and now they've trusted me to work with them on the bigger deals. So I'm willing to put the time in, because that's the what I'm building. I'm not a big firm. We have paralegals and assistants and that sort of thing, but I don't have the benefit of having 100 partners involved with this stuff. I've been doing this all referral based and just grinding, just like you guys. So yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. My question just escaped me. Let me see if I can get it back here.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah. I was going to ask, is there a likelihood that projects that are, or properties that have tangled titles, could they be better deals? Could they be like more lucrative investments, and that be a reason why somebody would want to pursue it?
That's actually a really good question. So this like comes down to your negotiating abilities.
Yeah.
Like a classic version, and this isn't necessarily a tangled title, but in my mind, it's in the same ballpark, is where you come to me and you say, yo, Joe, there's a squatter in this property. What can we do to get them out immediately? And I'm like, it's Philadelphia. You can't get them out immediately, but here's what I can do. I can tee this up. I can hook you up with a great courtroom attorney. I can make sure all of your I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and getting the filings in. And so what my point is that then you go back to the seller and you say, hey, I met with an attorney, and there's no way you're going to get this person out in the next 14, 15 months. So therefore I'm willing to stick this out, and I'm willing to work with getting this untangled, but I need to knock 20 grand off the cost, or whatever your negotiating ability allows. That's what a lot of this stuff allows for my folks to do. And the problem is, of course, if you're the first person to find the seller and you're the first person to tell them about their problem, they might not believe you, and they might try to shop it around. And so you might tell them it's going to be X amount, and therefore you'd like a discount of Y amount off what you offered them in order to stick with it. And they may say, go to grass. But then when they talk to the next person and they refuse to touch it, the next person refuses to touch it, suddenly your offer to handle all the legal work and get it untangled for a reduced sale price seems more sexy. And that happens very often.
Right. So, I mean, in addition to it possibly being a more lucrative investment, I guess what you were saying is it also could be like a kind of planning for the long term, right? Thinking about what projects you're going to want to be completing in a year or two, or at the end of that timeline, as opposed to approaching or attacking a tangled title and being like, oh, I want to develop this in the next 3-4 months. You got to let go of that that expectation, right? It's kind of more of a long term thing. Sounds like.
Right. I mean, that's probably the key takeaway that I try to counsel people when they, new clients who aren't aware of how laborious and how lumbering, slow moving the Philadelphia court system is. Right. If you're in the counties, if you're out in Delco, I mean, I can get stuff done in half the amount of time. It's just, Philly is where the deals are, and we can only play the cards we're dealt, and they do not prioritize these sorts of matters, because as we all know, Philadelphia has a lot of pressing matters that are happening every single minute in their court system. So this stuff gets the short shift, to the detriment of people trying to make careers in this industry.
Okay. So now let's talk about where the rubber meets the road, and how does this happen? Like, how does a new developer acquire and develop a tangled title? What is the timeline like? What should they expect of the process? How does it actually get done?
Well, like, I guess you got to think about it in terms of what the different case is. Is it a probate issue? Like, I'm dealing with something now where this client of mine, I'll call him Bob, has been living in this awesome, I mean, the house is not in great shape, but it's huge. It's in South Philly, on a really sexy block. The values are 500 plus, and he's been living there since he was born. His mom passed away. He's in his late 60s now. His grandma is listed as the owner. His mom and him lived there after she passed away, and now he lives there by himself. And he finally decides to sell it. He wants to move to Margate. He should be able to swap this property for exactly where he wants to move, but he finds out that it's still in his grandma's name. And not only that, she had several children, and not only that, they all had kids. So suddenly there's what's called a petition for determination of title, where I'm filing with the orphans court not only probate paperwork, but effectively a court case to get the court to rule that he's the one that has control of this property. And so the steps to do that are opening the probate, asking the court to allow him to be the administrator, and then asking the court to determine that he should be the one that owns the property. And what goes into something like that? I mean, there's a lot of nitty gritty proving why you should be the owner. You put all this time in, you paid all the taxes, you paid all the insurance, stuff like that goes into actually proving that case. But the timeline for something like this, like we've been at it since January of 2021, and we just got our determination case in August. So that's a year and a half, more than a year and a half, where he's sitting on his hands. And the alternative would be to team up with his cousins and go from a 100% ownership share to a 1/16 ownership share. But instead, he's proving to the court that he's entitled to it. And so that's a benefit to him specifically. And he's my direct client in this scenario, unlike some scenarios where it's the buyer themselves. This is the seller. And so his title is Tangled. He's entitled to 100% of the proceeds of this property. I have to prove that to the court, or else, we would have to make deals with his family. And, we're not getting a lot of pushback in this scenario, but no one's really willing to say that he gets 100% without us proving it. So that's like one in the probate realm. Something in like,
sounds like a big fat court process is what it sounds like, and it's something that maybe like developers might not be too attuned to. They're just hiring the lawyer and kind of subject to the process, right?
Yeah, dude. Like I'm doing a family tree for this guy's grandma. I'm having my paralegal piece together death certificates, pictures of graves, obituaries to try to show where how everything played out. And not only that, we're collecting from him, and we're collecting from the Philadelphia Revenue Department and his insurance company proofs of all the payments he made. You know what I mean? To try to like create what needs to be created.
During this process, is the developer just kind of on standby and just getting updates, receiving updates, or is there any active role that they hold in that process?
No, there's no active role. It's every 6 months or 3 months. I believe they're on a 3-month renewal period now. The developer reaches out and says, "Hey, let's renew our contract. I'll put more money down. That'll go hard if you're successful. Otherwise, we get the deposit back." Just to keep him involved in the process. And so that's an example of something that's happening right now. And it's just fits and starts. I might get an email from one of the cousins who says like, "I'm fine, I'll sign off on this, no problem." We send them a paperwork, they deal with it. We might get an email from a cousin saying, I'm not gonna help you out here. We might get something from the city saying, "Here's a list of all of the taxes this guy paid since 1970. Or we might get an email saying like, we can't find it. You have to come down to our archives. And so I got to send a runner down to the city archives to look through microfiche to try to prove stuff. So it's like, to me, it's like being a detective and putting a puzzle together.
Yeah, I mean, just from your brief explanation, it's clear why it takes so long, right? It's kind of a detailed nitty-gritty process of uncovering all the information. It's, I guess, what you pay a title company, a title search for. And that's my next question is, really, when are people like finding out that the title is Tangled? I know it could be as simple as in a discussion with the seller, they mentioned that, "Oh, I don't actually have ownership of blah, 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 blah." Is it up until that title search where, that's kind of your final determiner of what the situation is? Or is there ways you can learn more about the property before that? I guess my question is just like, when should somebody realize that, okay, I should talk to a lawyer about this, or I need to pursue this with a lawyer?
That's a good question. So like for my off-market buyers, I have helped them create prompts in their agreement of sale that if you fill it out like with the seller and actually double check what they're saying, it will oftentimes tip you off that something is amiss. So like, instead of the normal bit where it's like name of seller, name of buyer, for the seller piece, I have several questions there. Who, like most recent deed, owner on deed, who is signing this document? What is their relation to the owner that's mentioned on the deed? And so as you have them fill it out, you don't cut corners and you actually do the research. you can go on Atlas, which I'm sure you guys have pointed people to in the past. You can go on atlas.phila.gov while you're talking to a seller and just say, hey, it says here this is titled in someone's name. Who's this? Oh, it's your grandma. Well, what are you able to sell it? Yes. Really? Do you like the next question on this agreement of sale is, when were you granted letters of administration that allow you to sell the property? Oh, you weren't. And then all of a sudden, like, the alarm bell should be going off.
Okay.
And then I can, I even help instruct people, like, even if that person is not the rightful owner, you can get them to sign an agreement of sale that could be binding if they turn out to be the one that is entitled to sell the property. So they're selling, oh, I'm the only one left in the family, blah, blah, blah. So they sign it as heir to the owner. And then, you get moving. And even if they try to say, oh, well, at the time I wasn't the actual owner, so I couldn't actually sell it to you, blah, blah, blah. You'd say, no, my lawyer and I, we have this set up. So, we're locked into a contract here. And okay. So, I'm just kind of going in a different direction a little bit in my brain, but
no, that was a great answer. Just like ask questions, when you're, the more questions you ask, the more opportunities there are for them to let something out that triggers you right in your process to think, okay, this is going to be a longer haul than I thought, or blah, blah, blah. But yeah, that's great. That was a great answer. And I do see a good amount of questions piling up here as we're talking. So my last question.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah. I definitely want to leave some time, and I'm sure others will comment there or type in questions as I wrap up here. But just kind of want to get any last tips or thoughts you have on the topic. Maybe if you have any other examples to provide of situations you've found or you've helped developers out with. What's your final words of advice here for Jumpstarters who encounter these types of properties?
Don't be afraid. Like, there's people call me and they're just like, they sound so dejected. Like, Joe, here's the title report. Like, I'm screwed, right? I'm screwed. I can't buy it. And then it's oftentimes not as bad as you think. Like, sometimes you may find, like, in the 70s and the 60s, there was the ability in Pennsylvania to do door-to-door mortgage sales. It sounds crazy, but it was a thing where a guy could come to your door, knock on the door and say, hey, if you sign this document, I'll give you a check for $2,000. Meanwhile, the interest rate was through the roof, and the guy writes 50 of them in Point Breeze, and over the years, some of them got satisfied and paid off, and some of them got paid off and didn't get satisfied, and then that guy, who was just an individual, died, and this is something I've actually dealt with. And so his mortgages are on file on 10 properties in Point Breeze. So once I figured one out, then I could go around and try to help folks, because I knew how to handle it specifically. It could be that there's an heir that's still alive that would be allowed to sign off on these. So, like, I guess, like, don't be afraid, because oftentimes I can come up with a creative solution that might save you some time, or even if not, I can help you think through how to eventually get this property where you want it to be. And hope is not lost, but come to me sooner rather than later, or you're whatever attorney you guys want to are talking to, and we might be able to get you out of this and get you where you need to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Why don't you, before we move into the Q&A here, do you want to let people know how they can contact you or get in touch if they have, situations they want to run by you?
Yeah, should I drop my contact info somewhere, or it's easier?
You can put it in the chat, and then I'll reply with it, and then also we'll send it out in a follow-up email so people have it in their emails, anybody who had registered and applied and attended. Yeah,
cool. I mean, I'm Joe Consul Madison. I know I told you to call me Joseph. I just instinctively say Joe, but I've been trying to go by Joseph recently. I'll drop my what you call it in the chat.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. Well, I'm going to jump into the live Q&A here. Feel free to just answer to me like you're answering it to the attendee. But it looks like we got some good questions here, and then we'll wrap it up for tonight.
Great.
First one here comes from Tawana, and they were wondering, is it still a tangled title if a relative lives in the house for 21 years? Would the relative be able to take ownership with adverse possession? So that sounds like a question for you, Joe.
Adverse possession is a whole other topic, and that's actually one of the people. I've come across situations where 15 years ago someone files an adverse possession miscellaneous deed filing on a property, and they don't actually pursue it in court, and then that's something that I have to get taken off the title. But generally, adverse possession is nearly impossible to use to get ownership of a property. I mean, it's so the standards. There's several standards that you have to hit. Open and notorious. You have to. I don't have all that information off the top of my head, but it's not really any kind of strategy to take possession of a property. It works better a situation where someone lives like in the middle of a block, there's an empty lot next door, and they've been using that lot to park cars and throw parties for 30 years, and no one's ever claimed an interest in it. And that's the kind of situation where it makes more sense. But actual properties where you're living in it, it's almost impossible, I would say, to take possession through adverse possession. That's just not really something.
Okay. Got it. All right. Thank you, Tawana. And the next question here comes from J.S. Williamson. They were wondering, even though it may take 18 months, how much would one expect to pay in court fees? So I guess we talked about the timing and how the delay could be, but is it court fees? I guess they're meaning attorney fees that they're paying to the attorney who's handling the case, right?
Yeah.
What would you estimate that to be for your average, Tangled title case?
I don't know, around $3,000 if I had to guess.
Okay. And that's over the course, is that paid at once, or is that, like you said?
No. Like I said, I'm super flexible. Like
Right.
my bigger guys will put a bunch on retainer with me. But I am happy with folks coming out of pocket for things like all of the expenses. And if I judge it to be something that I'm going to win, I'm happy to get paid, at the sale of the property and that sort of thing.
Cool. Sterling Peacock wonders if I have a similar situation that Joe mentioned in the beginning. How do we get in touch? Oh, so we got your contact info there. Let's see. That actually, I don't think it actually showed up in the chat there for some reason. No worries. I'll throw it in there when I get a second here. The next question here comes from Keith, and he was wondering, in the eyes of the court, what is the order for passing down an unwilled property left by a deceased grandparent?
In the eyes of unwilled property. So that's, yeah. So you have to get a timeline or a family tree showing whether or not, you're the one that's entitled to be the administrator of the estate. Typically, the entitlement to administer an estate is first your spouse. If no living spouse, then your children. If no living children, then your siblings. If no living siblings, then you go out from there to family members. But assuming you've got a family member who's the entitled person, they could then open the estate with the city of Philadelphia. If it's an old estate, there's a decree we have to get called a 21-year decree. And then we have to get you sworn in as the administrator. And once you're sworn in as administrator, you get a short certificate, which then allows a title company to insure the title and you sign on behalf of your deceased relative.
Okay.
That's kind of.
Gotcha. And Keith has another question, but real quick, JS had followed up regarding the court fees, and he was actually wondering specifically about the court fees, not just the attorney fees, like filing the petition or anything like that. Is there extra associated costs with it other than the attorney fees?
Oh yeah, of course. There could be tons. I mean, just opening a court case in Philadelphia costs like $400. Opening a probate's like $500. Sometimes if you're trying to, like for this mortgage case that I was mentioning, I had to prove to the court that this guy was not out there and still alive. So I had to submit his death certificate. I had to advertise in a newspaper and to see if he would actually respond. Of course, that didn't happen. And
Funny,
advertising in the newspaper was $800. So
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Okay, gotcha. So it sounds like the developers like line item, and this is Keith's question, the line item in their budget, right? If they're preparing a pro forma for a Tangled title, maybe include $4,000 or $5,000, give or take, what they might need in addition to the attorney fees and everything. Yeah.
Yep, correct.
Great. Next question here comes from Johanny, and they were wondering, first, can I encounter a property with a Tangled title in an auction sale? And if so, who would be responsible for the legal cost, the auctioneer or myself? That's a good question.
Oh, I don't.
Do you know that?
Uh, no, I think in all auctions, unless it's a sheriff sale that the city puts on themselves, it's buyer beware, and so you're in charge of everything.
Okay, gotcha.
All the,
And you think that there might be a distinction if it's a sheriff sale? You're saying, or no?
there might be a distinction. Yeah, well, with the city sheriff sale, oftentimes you get the properties subject to nothing. So the city itself is allowed to sell you a property clear of any issues, but that's part of a longer process where, because of taxes or things owed to the city, they then have the ability to clear the decks and sell the property, just subject to what you owe the city, kind of a thing.
Okay, gotcha. And I'm surprised it's taken us to get this long to this next question here, but Desiree asks, I found out that a lot of the abandoned properties in Philly are owned by the city of Philadelphia or Section 8. What is the process for getting these titles clear? So I'm not sure if that's in the same discussion, but how do you acquire a city-owned property? Is that a Tangled title issue, or is that something different?
That's a different discussion. There was a time when you could reach out to the city and you could get them to agree to sell you something. However, that's no longer the case. Now it's all sort of a political process where you can you can request a council person sell a property, but you can't request that you be the buyer. So it puts them on the auction block and that kind of a thing. But there's no like surefire way for you to step in and actually get the city to agree to sell you something specifically. So.
Okay, and Desiree, I think we had a JUMPinar probably over a year ago on specifically how to acquire city-owned property. So I don't think I was there for that one, but if you go back and review that recording, you might have some better answers. But thanks, Joe, for trying for us. Okay. The next question here comes from another attendee, and they were wondering, how can one be proactive and gather all documents for a Tangled title? No intent to sell the property, just to continue living in the property. So that question throws me off a little bit. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, not completely. I mean, is it saying like you could always like pay $250 to a title company, get them to issue a title report, and then see what's on there, and then take it to me, and we can deal with it. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. So there is a case where you could just reach out to, even if it's not for a purchase or a sale or anything, you can just say, hey, can you run a title search on this and get me the information, and then go from there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were also wondering, they use phila.gov and Atlas to check ownership on properties. Is the owner info up to date on these sites, or is there a better resource? So I asked my boss that. I'm like, Angie, is like, when is this going to be updated, or why isn't this doc showing up on here? And it's kind of just how the city works, right? With the update and like how up to date that information is there on Atlas, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, what they're not updated on is typically deeds. So that's the problem, is oftentimes deeds don't show up there for like 90 days or something like that. But
so I guess to answer the question, is there a better resource? No, not really. You just kind of got to wait till the Atlas uploads it, right?
Correct. Yep.
Gotcha. And our last question for tonight comes from Keith, and they were wondering, do you handle the error searches when needed, family tree, pictures of graves, etc., or do you use another person or company? So is that all on the attorney who does that research process for the hairs, like family tree and pictures of graves?
Yeah, I mean, we that's stuff that we do, and then that my office has the ability to handle. So that's something that we.
Yeah, that's not going to be on the responsibility of the buyer or the developer, right?
No. Usually it's so like a lot of developers have like a middleman who is constantly in contact with the seller, and I might use that person because oftentimes these folks aren't savvy on email, savvy on phones. So I'll have like a middleman who I pose my questions to. Where was your grandma born? Do you have her birth? Like stuff like that, and then someone then follows up constantly with that seller to get the information they need, because I'm not going to be the one nudging. I'm going to ask the questions, and if they don't want to answer it, it's going to take you longer to get the property because I'm not getting any help from the seller. So oftentimes I'll keep everyone in the loop and say, here's the information that I need still. I asked the seller for it 2 weeks ago. As an attorney, I just can't nudge and nudge and nudge and nudge, but you can. And so go out and get it. And so that's often how I am helpful, because it's always clear what's needed and who needs to give it to me. And then oftentimes we can work together to figure that out. So,
Okay, cool. And thanks to JS who noticed a couple questions in the chat here. The first is, can you use conservatorship to get around a Tangled title? We've also had to jump around conservatorship, but is that any use here in acquiring a Tangled title?
no, not really. What sort of conservatorship are they speaking of? Like for a blighted property, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've discussed previously, conservatorship over a blighted property that you want to rehab and develop. Would the title clearing process just be kind of on top of that, or does the conservatorship handle that as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah. When you take possession through conservatorship, you don't, the stuff doesn't fall off title.
Yeah.
It's not like you don't like magically get a perfectly clear title, or else people would work together. I could just figure out so many ways to exploit the system if that was what was happening, but no, that's not how.
It doesn't. It doesn't get around anything, but it just like helps you get ownership, right? Okay, and the next question here is from Dre, and they were wondering, and this will be our last for tonight, and then we'll wrap it up. He said, "My grandmother passed, and I'm on the deed along with my aunt who passed. How easy would it be to grant administration?" So, what's your expertise here, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, reach out. We need original death certificates and a family tree. That's where all of these start. I send it over to my paralegal. She reviews it, and then we'll let you know how easy it's going to be and what the anticipated cost is.
Great. All right, awesome. Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining us tonight. That was a great conversation. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm happy we had so many great questions from people. But yeah, thanks for taking the time, and I hope to speak to you soon again.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for giving me an hour, and I'll sign off. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Just a little quick sneak peek of what we have coming up here with our JUMPinar series. Next JUMPinar is probably going to be the 15th or the 22nd, which is the following week. And we're working on locking down a speaker for that, but we'll update and send out emails once we do have that scheduled. Later in July or in June, at the very end of this month, Angie, our program director, and my boss is going to be joining us for a Jumpstart Loan 101. So I'm sure that will be a very exciting session. And then for the remainder of the summer, we've so far got planned a July 13th JUMPinar with one of our Jumpstart mentors, Deep Date Here Math. She's going to be talking about working with contractors, which is obviously going to be a very popular topic. And then later in July, we have Every Building Has a Story with our president and founder, Ken Weinstein, who will join us for that discussion. But yes, this JUMPinar will be available as a recording at jumpstartgermantown.com/library. And you can just head there and view all the past episodes. And this one will be up as soon as I can get it up, probably tomorrow or by the end of the week. And also these, some of them, not all of them, but most of them are available as podcasts. If you just search Jumpstart Philly Radio on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube or anything like that. Also on our website at jumpstartgermantown.com/podcast. But that's all we got tonight. Thanks so much for joining us, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their Wednesday, and I will see you in a few weeks. Thanks.